What about eat less messaging? Then there's a conflict. So what do you get? Instead of eat less meat, eggs, dairy, junk, what do they say? Eat less saturated and trans fatty acids, things like that. Biochemical components, right? Because they don't want to mention foods because that's too politically unpalatable.
USDA, I've read their mission is to expand markets for agricultural products. But at the same time, they're coming out with the dietary guidelines. Is that one of the challenges you have in the States?
The USDA has an inherent conflict of interest. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, look, the same thing happened here in Great Britain, right? There was the Ministry of Food and Forestry, right? And then the mad cow debacle came, and they basically dissolved the department, right? Put food safety in charge of, medical professionals in charge of food safety instead of agricultural professionals. Same conflict of interest exists in the States. U.S. Department of Agriculture has this dual mission to promote agricultural products. That's what they're there for. But also, we put them in charge of food safety, meat inspections, helping to come up with the nutrition guidelines. So when it comes to eat more messaging, the message is clear. Eat more fruits and vegetables. There it is, right there in black and white in the dietary guidelines. But what about eat less messaging? Then there's a conflict. So what do you get? Instead of eat less meat, eggs, dairy, junk, what do they say? Eat less saturated and trans fatty acids, things like that. Biochemical components, right? Because they don't want to mention foods because that's too politically unpalatable.
But they'll mention vegetables, they'll mention fruits.
Well, they'll mention fruits and vegetables because it's an eat more messaging. Yeah. Everybody's happy. Promote agricultural products and promote health. If they can do it without undermining the profit motive, they'd be happy to make the American public healthier.
In your book, you use words such as drug lords, quite conspiratorial words, some would argue, when you're talking about the medical industry. I think I saw that in the preface. Can you just explain a little bit about how corrupt the medical industry is in the US? It's kind of related to what you've talked about already.
Well, there's a number of barriers for doctors. So you say, okay, we understand why some of the mainstream medical associations are sucking up to industry because they're being sponsored by big pharma, for example. But why aren't individual doctors speaking out? Well, there's a severe nutrition deficiency in doctors in education. We just weren't taught this in medical school, so we graduate without these powerful tools in our medical toolbox. We just weren't taught how to teach people to take better care of themselves, right? But of course, there's other barriers. There's lack of time, lack of reimbursement. Doctors aren't paid to tell people how to take better care of themselves. And also, there's much of medical education, both during medical school and postgraduate medical education, is paid for by the drug industry. I mean, the number one reason people go to their doctor in North America is what are called blood pressure checks. And they keep going to get their blood pressure checked so they can tweak the blood pressure medications. And so that's a boon not only to big pharma, which sell these chronic disease drugs that people take every single day for the rest of their lives because they're not actually treating the cause of their disease, right? Because they're not actually changing their diet. So they need to be treated every day for the rest of their life. So it's the boon to the big pharma, but also that's where the doctor's getting their next BMW from and sending their kids to college. I mean, it's the bread and butter of the GPs, of the primary care docs, is these blood pressure checks, which wouldn't be necessary if they didn't have high blood pressure. The number one killer risk factor in the world, 9 million people dying of high blood pressure, a disease that need not occur if people ate plant-based diet, something we've known since the 1920s.